Hey, how's it going? Do, do, do. Okay, still picking up my music. How's everyone doing today? Enjoying the nice Sunday? Do, do, do. Last Sundays in Germany, so chill here. As compared to what? Is it just because like everything's closed on Sunday as well? Because I came from the UK before, right? So like shops and all that stuff were still open on Sunday. Got invited to a virtual wedding. Yeah, that's gonna be strange for sure, man. It's gonna be awesome though. It's gonna be unique. Yeah, that's a good question. You probably still get dressed up, right? Maybe only the top half and just have like your cozy pants on. Let's have a look. We're gonna wait for more people to come in, and then we're gonna get started with these questions. Hey, Pame Dominguez. Yeah, I was thinking about streaming yesterday, but then we had like a pretty busy day, so I didn't do any streaming yesterday. And it's also been like a pretty busy week at work too, so it's just well, and on top of that, Cyberpunk is out too. I've been playing that. A lot of stuff going on this week. But I was thinking about maybe streaming either later today or well, in the next weeks. I'm probably going to do like a lot of streaming because I'm already on vacation for the end of the year. So I might just make use of that time to do like more streams and just dive into my personal projects. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, I'm not really planning to do anything for Christmas really because we're not going home or anything like that. So because this year is a little bit weird how that works, right? Um. So yeah, I'm probably gonna replace that with just like working on personal work and just exploring some stuff, playing some more games as well. Maybe even picking up like a couple of books or something to just get some variation in. Would be interesting. Oh God, Raj. I think I have a suspicion about what you're gonna suggest me. What kind of books are you into? Well, I got two new ones from my girlfriend for like an early Christmas. So I need to get into this one called a Cyberpunk, and also got this one. Yeah, two good books that I need to get into. I know that they're purely art books. I don't know. For other books, I don't know what I'm gonna read yet. I need to look some stuff up. Maybe I don't know. Could be anything. I don't really have like a specific thing that I want to read. Maybe you could define it as like self-help books, quote unquote, where it's like just how to improve like your life in general. I know that that's like a big statement, but all right. Anyway, this is AMA Sunday, right? So let's get into it. We got a fair good number amount of questions, and we're gonna start with an anonymous question actually. So first question is, I'm an environment artist. Am I too late to start in the games industry? Because I've seen people who are already in big positions like senior, lead, and principal environment artists by the time they are 25. You shouldn't care about that. Like, there's always gonna be people younger. Like even if you look at those people, right? Like if you look at those extreme examples, there's even gonna be people that are even younger that have achieved quote unquote more than they do. It's all about you, your personal timeline, and what you're most comfortable in. Because it doesn't really matter if you achieve something quick, because they might feel really stuck in that role, right? You don't know how they feel about their role, and they might be thinking about like switching it up, but they're so stuck in it that it's really hard or difficult for them. So it's always interesting to think about like the flip side of that coin as well. But definitely not too late. I've seen people that are older, like 30s, 40s, like switching to get into the games industry for the first time. And I mean, as a junior, right, at that point, and they've been doing fine. Like they love what they're doing. So age doesn't really matter as long as you're passionate about it and you really know that you want to do this. Just go for it. Because I know it's kind of weird to look at your own timeline, right? Like your own uh, age number and then equate it to like, oh, by this time I should be like a senior or a lead or whatever. But I honestly think that if you have different life experiences, that is going to be more helpful in the games industry because you have a variation of experiences instead of only the experience from like the games industry. So I wouldn't say definitely like 26 is not too old. Definitely not. It's a really good question because I think a lot of people struggle with that where they just look at their own age, but age doesn't really matter. It's just about when it what it boils down to is always just like what do you want to do? And then the timeline doesn't really matter. Like as long as you achieve it, then it's good. And things are going to change along the way too. Because like for instance, you really wanted to get into the games industry. I'm just like naming an example, right? So you really want to get into the games industry. You finally get in and then you maybe realize that it's not really the thing for you and you might switch to like another industry later on. Who knows? Can all happen. Yeah. When it just comes to down to age, don't worry about it. Just keep trucking. Hope you can't hear me slurping my coffee. Next question. So these are two questions, but I split them up. Hey, Sniper Echo, afternoon. This is a question from Subham Tripathi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. So excuse me for butchering your name. I want to know that as an environment artist, are you supposed to know Folio's creation as well when working for a small mid-level studio? Short answer, no. You don't. If you're an environment artist, I would say that foliage is like a niche, and most of the time, they have dedicated people for that. Like, I would even say in like mid level studios. Obviously, if you're in like a small studio with like 5 people and you're one of the two environment artists, I'm just naming something here, right? Obviously, the chances are highly likely that you might need to work on foliage. That doesn't mean that you need to have it from the get go. you can still learn that on the job too. Especially if you're working together with like another good environment artist. But yeah, like the smaller you go, the more generalized you become. Because yeah, I still think that in most cases, like foliage creation is still like its own thing. Like it could be foliage and rocks and all that stuff is going to be like the more natural assets are going to be like under one group. But I would not go as far as like really focus that hard on like foliage creation. You might see it on my portfolio too, right? Where I have like one piece that is purely based on foliage. But I did that when I was already at a studio and I was just like exploring new things. And that's when I just discovered like all the different ways how to create foliage with speed tree and what was I using then? Like speed tree. I think I was trying also just like really manual ways in Maya at that point. But yeah. It was all because I saw one of the other people doing it in the team and he was responsible, like it was my mentor. He was responsible for all the foliage in the game that we're working on back then. And it was just something that I just wanted to explore. But I would definitely not want to see that. Well, if it's good, like if you have it on your portfolio, it's good, right? Like it's always good to have like that additional leg up, but it's not a crucial thing to have in your portfolio. You might as well just have like a killer scene with some foliage that you use from mega scans, for example, or from other online packages. And then the next part of that question is the sculptures used inside of environments like the Uncharted series, are those created by character artists or environment artists? That is a good question because I did like a couple of sculptures as an environment artist in at Frontier. Um so yeah, I think my assumption is that in a game like Uncharted, they do have dedicated character artists that do that because they usually do it way quicker than environment artists do. But our character artists at that project, they were preoccupied with doing other stuff. So yeah, that's why we just had to do like really simple statues for that. But I would guess that in an environment like in environments like the Uncharted series, you definitely have dedicated character artists that do that. So yeah, real good question. Really good question. Um, I wonder, is there anything we can add to that? I don't think so. I would assume that most bigger studios they have like dedicated people like that. Like it's coming down to like availability and like how big the team is. If you have like one character artist that's doing like all the characters from like a game that you're working on, like they're not gonna have time to do some additional stat use, for example. So you might just have to pick that one up and maybe use like a base character that they made, do do some adjustments to it yourself, and then you have a statue. There's there's a lot of gray zone there where you could start with like a base made from a character artist, or you could start with like a base mesh that you bought with from like the studio, right? That the studio provides to you. There's so many options. All right. So before we dive into the next questions, right? Like I just want to mention as well that if you're new to this stream, feel free to just add any questions in the chat too. I'm gonna go to the questions that we have from the community first, and then we'll dive into like the chat questions. All right. Next question from Darje Skarmoon. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm pretty sure that I butchered it again. So I apologize. Y3, hello. Hey, welcome to the stream. So, next question. What is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you started out when it comes to environment art? There are like two other topics to this question, but let's start with just environment art. Um, let's think, right? Like if I can only pick one, I would say that fundamentals are more important than all the technical aspects of it. Like if we're purely talking about environment art, uh it would be something like that, where don't lose sight of like the fundamentals. Like fundamentals are super important when it comes to environment art. Yeah, because I think all the other stuff that I'm thinking of is more technical, but if we're just looking at like environment art as general topic, that would be the main thing. Just focus on the fundamentals and just keep fundamentals in mind all the time. Right, so that same question, like what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you started out when it comes to career development, is like the next thing, or like personal development. Um, let's think. I think there's definitely more here, but if I had to pick one again, it would probably be not being afraid to speak up my mind or like ask questions. And I think to the same extent is just not being afraid to trust your artistic insight. Because I think in the beginning there was so much doubt of like being surrounded by people that are better than you or have more experience than you. And then you always run into this self-doubt cycle where it's like, oh, I don't really want to say anything about this because I don't know if it's going to be wrong or not. And then my option was always just like to observe and just shut up. And I think now I could have learned like way quicker by just being more open about that, and like even talking about like how I approach stuff, and then having like another artist maybe react like, that's weird because you could do it this and this way, and then it's like way quicker, for example. So I definitely feel like I missed out on some of the growth there. But then on the other side, like I was always so set on doing everything myself that I learned a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have learned if I were to ask someone else. But I would definitely say, yeah, speaking my mind, being more open about stuff, and oh god, I think now thinking about it, I think that in general, if you look at the whole thing, it would be picking your battles, really, and just knowing when to ask things, or like when to speak up about stuff. That's probably the biggest thing that I learned over the years, and that's what I see a lot of people are still missing. Because if you pick your battles, then you're not gonna be seen as a person who's constantly complaining. So say for example, there's like a small thing that is technically uh you don't really agree with, but it's not gonna impact like the whole project, for example. It's not gonna matter that much if that there, and then just let the other person deal with that problem when it comes to them. Or like if it ever does, right? You never know. Um but then if there are bigger things that are going to impact you in a big way, that's when I would stand up and be like, look, hey, can we talk about this before we dive into it? And I think it's good to be seen in that light, when they appreciate and they still value your opinion, instead of like, if they know that it's going to come to you, you're always going to say something, and that's going to put up like a barrier for the other people to just approach you. I would say that is a big thing. And then the last part of this question is, what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you started out when it comes to the industry? Uh, I would definitely say I would definitely say the wage. Like this is I'm super happy with the wage that I have now, right? But I had this uh weird mindset of only looking at like the American companies for their wage and like looking at numbers like I don't know 100K a year, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's going to be really good." And then realizing that I was only looking at like the American numbers and it didn't make much sense. I would definitely say that that was like probably the biggest shock in the beginning when I was not expecting to see a number that was way smaller than like 100K. I would just had like way off um what is it, like expectations for the industry. It was pretty funny though. I think a lot of people are smarter in that aspect, especially now. But yeah, I wasn't at that point. It's pretty funny to think back at it though. So pretty good question. I like these sort of questions because there's always some point of me that thinks about like preparing for questions like this, but it's pretty nice to just think through them like live and just see what comes up first. All right. Next question from Nikita. So, especially with a partner and now working from home, how do you find the balance between spending time with your partner, work, personal work, free time, and spending time on Beyond Extend content? Um, how do I find the balance? I don't think I've found a balance yet. Like that is still like heavily work in progress. We do have like some sort of a schedule. It sounds kind of weird, but we don't really think about it as much anymore. But it's mostly we sit together like at dinner and then we watch like one episode of a series. And then after that I get back to work. So if we're talking about like a normal day, right? So my day would just be getting up, working until whatever time I stop because it varies with like flexible hours. And then most of the time I would be doing the cooking, and then we would sit together and watch like a series for like an hour and a half, something like that, and just enjoy dinner together. And then I would get back to work, and then it just becomes like I've been trying this new system of doing doing like dedicated tasks like every day. So for example, I do like the weekly tip for the blog. I do that on Tuesday. And then the Monday I spend on articles or management or like more reaching out to other people, that kind of stuff. Then Wednesday I do a little bit of like blog preparation, which is just like looking up links and like just collecting them in like a Google Sheet form. And then, but that doesn't take too long though. So I usually spend my time just doing like personal work or whatever comes in between. And yeah, Thursday is block time, and then it's basically just uh free until the weekend because the blog also doesn't take too long anymore. Like I've optimized it pretty well. But when it comes to yeah balancing, I don't know. Still working that out. I spending way too much time on doing like a bunch of random stuff that doesn't really go anywhere, but I love doing that stuff. So I don't know. Just to give an example, just like figuring out like stuff in Notion, or like figuring out like a new way to optimize the workflow for I know that this is all like not really environment art related anyway, but like optimizing the automation for like my blog or like the website or social media or whatever. Like there's so many aspects that come to like the Beyond Extend stuff that I'm uh I'm keeping busy. But yeah, I think I'm gonna continue with just having like more dedicated days for like each task, and just trying to min max it and just be more focused when I do them too. Because I think at the moment, the thing that I struggle with the most is that I find myself not really being focused that much when I'm actually doing a task, and especially the more tedious ones, like reaching out to people or like preparing some documentation for the challenges, or like the more tedious stuff, like not really related to art. That's where I struggle the most, and just being like super focused, and that cuts into my time for like the other stuff as well, right? So that's why I'm trying this system of like having a day dedicated to one of the topics. I think it's working out all right up until this point. So yeah, I think it's gonna be like a work in progress until I retire, basically. And I would, yeah, just to come back to the question, I don't think I've found a balance just yet. I think I need to do some more searching. Um, Really good question though. Thanks, Nikita, for the really good questions every week. I appreciate it. Next question, and this is the second to last one from Leon, and then we'll dive into like the questions from the chat. So if you got any questions that you want to ask, feel free to just shoot your question in the chat, and then we'll go through them in a bit. So Leon, do you have any experience or know of someone's experience with double A or smaller studios? How do they compare in terms of salary, workload, and the hats to wear? Yeah, I do know some people that work in like smaller studios. Not too many though, and I don't really keep up with them like on a regular basis, right? But when it comes to first the salary, I think in general uh there's gonna be no difference there, to be honest. I think they do their best with like offering like a competitive salary, right? But I do think that in terms of like workload and like hats to wear, especially with workload, I think they're more conscious and more agile with the way that they do stuff. So say, what could be like a good example? I'm thinking about the development studio behind Hades, because I recently watched some, recently, like a month ago, I watched some documentaries on how they do their development, which was really interesting. I think that's the biggest boon of like just having a smaller studio, is just being flexible and agile in the way that they work, and that often results in um, more managed workloads, I would say. I think that might be a good way of looking at it. Um, but there's obviously, with the last part of the question, right? With more hats to wear, there's also more responsibility that falls on your shoulders. But I think that responsibility can also be like a really good thing, because you're more involved with the task. You're more dedicated to like getting to like a final result, because you're the one responsible for it. Like there's no one else that can do that stuff. Whereas again, generalizing, like in bigger studios, you always have people that can sort of pick up where you left off. um but yeah, I think I keep saying this all the time, right? Like it doesn't really matter studios what the studio itself offers. It's what you're looking for, because some people are really happy with like smaller indie games because of that responsibility, but you also have people on the other side who are like really happy with just having like a more, what do you call it, like a less responsible job, and not really being super involved with all the stuff that's happening, and just being able to clock in, do the work, and then clock out, and that's it. Whereas I think in smaller studios, you're the chances are higher that you take the work home with you. So that's definitely a thing that I would add to that. But you have to take this with a grain of salt, right? Because I never worked in like a double A or like a smaller studio. I think Frontier definitely came the closest, but I think when I joined, that was still like a studio from like 100 150 people, something like that. I'm working on Planet Coaster. So yeah, that's like my limited experience with that, and I wouldn't even say, I would call them more AAA than like AA. So yeah, good question, man. Good question. I would I would add that in terms of salary, I don't know. I think because often salary gets equated to like the responsibilities that you have, right? And in smaller studios, depending on which smaller studio you work for, uh, you might earn more, but there's also the possibility that you might earn less depending on how good the game is selling, because it's super competitive in like smaller slash indie studios. Like if your game doesn't sell, like people are not going to get paid. So yeah, definitely keeping that in mind too. This is obviously like a generalization again, right, from my end. So yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting. And then we have the last question from Jacob. Do you have any tips on ways to make you stand out more from other applicants besides work quality? Assume that the quality of work between two candidates is around the same. What are some things that would make you sway to one or the other, like presentation, content, etc.? Um, well, if we're assuming that work quality is the same, then we're kind of assuming that the presentation is the same as well, because that is like a big part of the quality of work, is like how you present your work too. Um, but let's see. I would definitely say that it depends on like the applicant you're searching for, right? Um, but say it's like a generalist environment artist. Let's just try to generalize this as much as possible. The thing that I really look for is good artistic insight. That is always the thing that I focus on, because I think that's the hardest thing to grow in. It's just like how they use lighting, how they use composition, how they tell a story with like the mood. Um, it's yeah, how they even use like the frame itself. Like when you have a person who really thinks about the direction that the player is going to be looking in, and like how to affect that, like on like a almost a psychological basis, like knowing to use certain colors to impact the mood of the players is is so much trickier to learn than all the technical information that you can get. Um, so that's definitely one, right? So the focus on like art fundamentals and like artistic insight. The second one for me personally, I would say personal work. Just looking at that, when you have, say, you have two people that come from uni, and then you have one that does personal work and one doesn't. Like the one that does personal work is definitely come across as more passionate, and um, yeah, it also just shows that they're thinking about it like after hours. Even though once you get into the industry, you can drop that, right? Like that's totally fine. But I think there's just, to me personally, because I did it for such a long time, that's something that speaks personally to me. Just having that passion behind your work and like 100% dedicated to it, and like really just going for it. Um, but if, because you put this in like brackets, right? So you added like presentation, content, etc. So I mean, if you want to talk about presentation and like the quality of work is the same, then obviously the one that can present it better is definitely going to win 100%. Because the work quality is only going to show if you can present it well. Like there's some portfolios that have like probably have like killer work quality in it, but then if they don't present it well with like where the lighting is off, or the scene is just way too dark, for example. Like no one's gonna see it. So that's gonna play with our assumptions that if you don't know how to show it off, then you're not really sure about where the quality is yourself. And that's gonna have like a massive dent on your portfolio. Like talk to, especially when we're talking about presentation and lighting, talk to either talk to lighting artists, or maybe even like graphical designers or something, like to how just get someone else's opinion about how to push it further. um oh, to add on to this, what about breakdowns, etc.? Yeah, they're definitely if you do a breakdown of your scene and you did some cool technical stuff, that's 100% appreciated. On that topic, we look at game portfolios because we want to see game art. And I think a lot of people forget that it's not only about the pretty picture. Like the pretty picture was draws you in. And then especially if you're a student, we want to see some of the well, not excuse me, not only the students, right? Like people trying to get into the industry. You need to show off that you can think about game art, think about the optimization, think about how you use your textures, like see if you can like optimize it the best way while still managing to get like the best possible look out of it. Because that is probably the biggest thing where a lot of people focus on either end of things. Where if you focus too much on the technical aspects and you see that the art is suffering, then it's not going to look as good as it could. Where on the other side, you have people that are like doing really crazy stuff, but it might not be game ready, so then it doesn't really apply for like a game art application. Um, yeah, so I hope that helps. Definitely breakdowns are good. Um, I think I think that's what you meant. Are you talking about like breakdowns from like, I don't know, 80 level breakdowns where you do like an article about how you did it, or is it more about like a picture where you highlight like this is the wireframe, these are the textures, like that kind of stuff? Lighting, the bane of my existence. I know, man, it's tough, and that's why I recommend just talking to like a lighting artist, like who's already in the industry, and just reach out to them and say like, look, I got this scene, but I'm kind of on the lighting. Like, do you have any recommendations? And always thank them for their time. Just in the project post, showing how USC achieved certain aspects of showing mass materials. Yeah, 100%. That's what I always love to do with my posts, especially the older ones where I was really diving into like the technical aspects and like shader creation and like worlds, what is it, like world aligned blending for certain assets, and how you combine that with like a panning texture to create like water that aligns with like direction of the world or something, like water dripping down from a mesh, or even like a spline based river generation kind of thing. Those are all things that I love to post about too. Like the more you can break that stuff down, like the more quote unquote nerdier you can get, the gonna look for you. Especially if it looks good. If you can combine the two, there's some real benefit in that. Because it's also just gonna be fun to talk about in like an interview where you don't only have like the one picture. There's like you scroll down and you see like the breakdown of it, how you did it, and then if you have someone on the other side who's really interested in that stuff too, it just really sparks like good conversations. It's a good question, Jacob. Thanks so much, man. All right, so let's dive into the chat questions now. Take a sip of my coffee here. great answers as always. Yeah, no worries, man. No worries. I hope it helps you guys out. I really do. Let's look. What kind of books are you into? We talked about that in the beginning a little bit. Do you think that it is possible to get a foliage artist position as a junior? All the jobs I'm seeing are all for seniors or similar. I think that comes down to what we talked about before, right? Where it is tricky because most of them are just born out of people already working in the industry and then just like moving into foliage art. I wouldn't say that it's impossible because it always comes down to like if you can create like good foliage and that is your passion, people are going to reach out to you. Like if you do good stuff and you really want to do that 100%, then you can break in as that too. I don't see a reason why not to. Especially if they see someone who's really dedicated to that kind of niche. I would say go for it. Because in the end you make your own job in the industry. Like to a certain extent, right? But like if you're really interested in the technical aspects, you're gonna gravitate towards those things anyway. Or if you are really enjoying foliage, like you mentioned, for example, like if you really love doing that, if you keep following that track, then you're gonna end up in like a foliage artist position. But I would say it can be tricky if you only see like senior positions, right? But don't let that stop you, because I think what they normally do is they still have environment artist positions for like juniors or graduates or whatever, more like entry level positions, right? Where they are actually looking for someone who has a bigger interest in foliage, but they don't put it specifically in the application because the application might be looking for just like all-rounder environment artists, like maybe 10 of them. I'm just naming like a number, right? But then they do know that from those 10 they might be looking for one or two who are more interested in foliage art. And that's also something that you can bring up in your interviews too. When they offer you an interview, you can just really put that forward and say like, look, this is my portfolio, it's almost all foliage, I know how to do environment art itself, like I know how to make trim sheets and all that stuff, so I can do environment art, but my passion is foliage. Like that is what I want to do. And it might be tough in the beginning because some studios might reject you on that basis, right? But it's like they're rejecting you because they know that you're not a good fit for the studio. And I think if you keep knocking on that door, the door is going to open at some point. Obviously, you could make a compromise, right? Like if you want to take the quote unquote easier route, because I don't think it's easier, is just getting in as like a normal environment artist and then within the industry like making your way to foliage artist. But as I said, that's up to you. Do you wanna potentially work for in an in a game studio for like 2 years until you get that foliage role, or do you just want to get that foliage artist role from the beginning? So that's like a really big choice that you have to make for yourself. And then, well, potentially get that role as like a foliage artist, but then maybe extend like the search a little bit longer because it's more of a niche, right? And that's how I look at it. It's a really good example. Really good example. Because I think there are people like that out there. Just really passionate about foliage and then trying to find their way in, but not really seeing that many opportunities. So I would definitely say just look at like junior environment artists and just bring it up like from the get-go, saying like, look, I'm applying to like junior artist portfolio, but I really want to do foliage. Because if you're passionate about something, like the company's gonna pick up on that, and that's where they want you. They want you in that position where you're the most happiest and like putting out your best work because it's gonna elevate the game itself. Lighting the bane of my existence. Great answers as always. Thanks. No worries. Since the Game Awards was last week, what is your game of the year? That's a good question. It's a good question. I'm still getting into Cyberpunk, right? So I think that might be my game of the year, even though I'm getting into the territory with it where it's becoming like more buggy and I'm seeing more random crashes and all that stuff. But if we're talking about it from like an environment artist perspective, purely my game of the year and why I play games is I want to be enveloped in the world. I want to be completely immersed in the world. And I got to say, like, Cyberpunk does it really well. It does it really well, just like in awe of the world that they created. Because there's also so many technical aspects to it, where they really try to push the bar and like the envelope of it, and like how good it looks. I honestly wasn't expecting it to look as good as it does, because I was just thinking about it from like a technical aspect, and I was like, look, they can't make such a dense looking world run properly. And I think you can definitely see that on like the older gen consoles, right? Where there's just like it's not happening. But like the load-in time is so ridiculous that by the time you get there, like it's still loading in stuff. But for me personally, it might still be my my game of the year. Because yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a world where I can just enter in and just be fully enveloped, and like there are moments when I'm just walking to my next quest. It was like 500 meters away. I'm just like, just taking in the world, looking how the people react. It's such an interesting space. It's so good. What is your game of the year actually? All the people in chat. What are you thinking about the games awards and like the game of the year? What's your game of the year? Okay, Pame Dominguez. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I'm focusing on hard surface things because I think there's more possibilities to get a job rather than foliage. But Christmas is coming, and I'm planning to do a ton of foliage, even if they aren't full environments. If we're talking about like hard surface, what are you talking about? Like doing actual like fully hard surface props, or is it more like generalist prop work that you're doing? Because if we're purely talking about like hard surface, like say um weapons or all that, I think that's even tougher to get into than foliage, honestly. From where I'm looking at the industry, I think that might be even tougher than foliage itself. Because you need, I'm thinking, right? Because I want to say that you need way more foliage than weapons or anything like that, if we're talking about purely hard surface. But obviously that depends on the game, right? Like if you're gonna be working on Halo, you're gonna have a ton of hard surface work cut out for you. But I think that's definitely a good shout, man. Trying to do tons of foliage, even if they aren't fully environments. I think smaller dioramas can really help. Like there's some great some great foliage work that some of the people on AC Valhalla did, and the way they present it is always like on this white background, and just having like small dioramas with like a couple of pieces of foliage interacting with each other. It looks so good, looks so pleasing. And technically, if you really want to get into foliage, that's how you present it the best way. You don't need like a full environment. project so far was do a sci-fi light. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, if you're doing uni stuff. Yeah, I think that universities are still more uh I I don't even know. I'm trying to think back if I had to do foliage. I think I picked up foliage because it was like the smaller environment that I wanted to do had foliage in it, but I don't think we had any dedicated like foliage classes. Not that I can remember. Because I think the more stereotypical way of getting into the industry is just like the high to low poly pipeline. Right now, it might be more like trim sheets and tilables and like the mid poly workflow. Maybe if industries are catching up to that. But yeah, no worries, man. No worries at all. All right, cool. So I'm gonna give you guys some time to just ask like a couple of questions, right? And if not, we might just have to we can cut this session short. Been going for almost an hour anyway. Oh, we haven't touched foliage neither. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a niche, right? Like if you really want to get into that, and yeah, I think it's like I said, it's still a niche to do it. And it's also, especially when talking about trees, right? It's so technical, it's so cumbersome when it comes to like creating them compared to like other things that you need to do. So yeah, I think it's interesting though, not just having like lots of self-made foliage in your scene. It's always what I love to do. I just don't want to. I don't want to be pushing speed tree sliders the entire day. Personally, my game of the year was Half-Life Alyx. Oh, well, I don't have VR glasses, right? But I watched like gameplay of it, and I'm pretty sure that if I had the opportunity to try it or like play it myself from start to finish, that would probably be my game of the year as well. Because it's like you said, it's and I mentioned this to my girlfriend when we were watching the game awards as well. It's setting like a new standard for VR games. Where before VR games were always like this pixelated mess and they were trying to catch up with like the quality of other games, but I think Half-Life Alyx just set like that standard now. They like push the envelope so far when it comes to VR. And yeah, I think I think it's crazy that they did that. And it's probably like the only time when I really was thinking about getting like a VR glasses. um how do you see the future of VR games? That's a good question because I'm not in touch with VR as much, right? So I don't have any VR glasses or anything like that, and I'm not really looking into any VR stuff. I think it's gonna be crazy though. Like it's just gonna become more and more immersive, and AR is gonna be a big topic of the future as well. Where especially with the hardware that you're wearing becoming less and less cumbersome, where it just at some point it will just become like a really small device that you're just wearing. Might take us a while to get there, but just imagine that you can have that power just in like a small glasses as you wear now, like small sunglasses or whatever. And I know we're talking about like the future, like the probably longer future, but I think it's gonna be there quicker than we expect, to be honest. So I'm really excited for that, where it just becomes like a thing you put on and you can just completely like immerse yourself in the world. Like it's become like, imagine it being like 360 view and whatever, just being like fully enveloped in it. That would be crazy. With like really good display panels, or just like AR, right? Where it's just like you switch over to like your virtual desktop. It's gonna be crazy. I should actually look at it a bit more. Just keep my eye on it just a little bit. Is your girlfriend into games at all? If yes, how is it like not being able to talk about your work because of NDAs? Um Yeah, she's into games for sure because we watch like the Game Awards and all that stuff. When it comes to NDAs, it's becoming more and more trickier because work from home, right? And like she's right next to me. So there are moments when I'm in meetings where they're like talking about like upcoming stuff where uh, I mean it's becoming weird with just NDAs. Because it's like you're in the same room together. Like whenever we have a meeting, I can't ask her to go in like a separate room because she's working on her desk as well. So yeah, it's tricky for sure. But I think the most important thing for me is just like whenever we have important meetings, I just shut the blinds and all that stuff. Because the thing is, there are a lot of apartments that can basically at this point see directly at my screen. So that's the main thing I do. Just shield it from other people that I don't know. With like a good DSLR, you can just snap screenshots or something. That would be that would not be good. Do you think VR will eventually replace normal gaming in the future, or do you think they will progress alongside each other? Well, there's not going to be like a full replacement, right? I think if we're talking about like a full replacement, we're talking about I don't know. I think we're talking about 50 years from now. Like it's gonna take a while before um everything picks up on that. Like VR needs to be first of all like really approachable from like a consumer standpoint, where it needs to be cheap enough that people will uh that you can just buy it, put it on, plug and play, and that's it. And it you need to kind of get into the bracket of like just a normal console, which is gonna happen over time for sure. But right now, if you're thinking about that, then you also need like a good PC to run all the games on it, right? Um, at least for most of them. But I will think it will be something like indie games or like retro games now. Like there's still like a giant market for like retro games. Um, and I think normal gaming as we see it now might become like another fading thing over time. But I think there's definitely also gonna be like a huge, maybe not a huge, but like definitely like a sizable portion of people that don't really like they have issues whenever they put on the glasses. They get really motion sick. So there's definitely gonna be people, well, unless they can solve it, and I'm pretty sure that they can, right? If they can solve that, then yeah, should be good. Because right now it's in its infancy, right? But then if you think about like what is it going to be in like 2 decades, for example, I think all those little things are going to be solved. But I will think they will definitely progress alongside each other for like a really long time. But the the thing I always think about is just how people are so stuck with their phones already, and people are probably gonna gonna call this ridiculous, but I think VR is gonna do the same at some point. I think VR and just AR is gonna probably merge with like all the stuff that we're doing now on our screens. It's just gonna be like more immersive. And just like you're completely enveloped in it. Yeah, exactly. I think VR is the stuff that we're talking about now, right? Like that is definitely like the biggest thing that people talk about. But I think AR is definitely gonna have like more potential in the future. And it's just gonna be because it's less cumbersome, I think. I think that's a big part of it. It's more consumer friendly where it has the potential to yeah. I don't know. I need to look up some stuff from that. I think it has the potential to be like less intrusive for like the consumer. Or is perceived at that at this point. Yeah, the future is gonna be crazy though. Gonna be crazy. But they're coming out with like a ton of cool stuff, like foldable screens, like the only foldable screens they have like rollable screens right now. They have which brand was it? Where you can actually just like um have like a rollable screen, like if you press a button, like the screen extends with like a flexible screen in like a phone. And that was pretty crazy. And just like all that tech is gonna keep evolving at a more rapid pace than we're used to. Like all the stuff that we saw in like the last 20 years. Like what are we talking about? Last 20 years? Like last 30 years, let's say. Like I grew up with like in the 90s, like pretty shitty internet, like it was pretty niche at that point still, like especially in Belgium and in my family, right? But look at us now. Like what are we doing on the internet? Like the internet is just becoming our lives. So I think it's only going to get more and more enveloped in it. I'm really excited for it now. I wanna watch some documentaries about it. Just see all the cool tech that they're working on. All right, guys. If there are no more questions, I'm gonna leave for this nice a nice Sunday. Time to play more Cyberpunk. Yeah, it's pretty interesting to play that game at the same time and just talk about this stuff. Obviously, it's pretty dystopian, right, in Cyberpunk, but I don't think we're gonna go there. I'm pretty hopeful for the future. But it's just still interesting to see all those things sort of play out in that game. All right, everyone. It was really good chatting with you all, and yeah, we're here every Sunday, right? So every Sunday at the same time, it's gonna be like 1 or like what is it, like 1 p.m. Berlin time every Sunday. So if you have like questions, feel free to drop in the next time. And yeah, have a nice Sunday, everyone. See ya.